Welcome to TaxLawGH and welcome to our video on withholding VAT. Before we continue, I'd like to mention that this is a very different concept from income tax withholding. So if you haven't seen those videos, you can take a look at those. But for now, just know that this is a concept under VAT. It's an indirect tax related concept and it has very little to do with the income tax withholding you probably already know about. So as we go through this, what I can guarantee is by the time you are done with this video, you should have a fair idea or actually know everything there is to know about withholding VAT in Ghana. As we commence, biggest difference between income tax withholding or the usual everyday withholding tax you know of and withholding VAT is one requires special appointment and the other does not require special appointment. Income tax withholding doesn't require appointment. Once you are making a payment in the course of your business or as part of your activities as a person taxable under the laws of Ghana, you are required to withhold. So for instance, if you are making a payment and that payment is a dividend payment, the law says if it's to a resident person, you withhold at 8%. If you are making payment and it's a payment for a service someone rendered to you, then if the person is resident, the law says you withhold at 7.5%. So there are different rates for different transactions for income tax withholding. And anybody except an individual in the course of conducting a business can withhold. They don't need to be appointed. On the other hand, we have withholding VAT or withholding on value added tax. For this, not everybody can withhold. You must have been specifically selected, specifically appointed by the Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority before you can become a withholding agent for VAT, or what we call a VAT withholding agent. So remember that VAT withholding agents must be appointed by the Commissioner General before they can commence their duties as a withholding agent for VAT purposes, unlike income tax where anybody at all can withhold. So back to what the law says. We are saying that the Commissioner General may in writing appoint a VAT withholding agent for the authority. So all you are doing here is to help the Ghana Revenue Authority collect their VAT in advance. If you have watched our video series on VAT, you know that VAT returns and the payment will be due ordinarily on or before the last working day of the subsequent month. So if you have transactions in the month of January, then the VAT return will be due on or before the last working day of the month of February, which is the subsequent month, right? What the withholding VAT concept seeks to do is to ensure that when you are making payment, you take a portion, which you'll find out shortly, 7%, and you pay this money to the GRA 15 days before time. So it's like an advanced collection mechanism for taxes. This is the way, if you look at the studies they've done on withholding VAT to ensure that revenue is assured, we prevent VAT fraud, and at least get some money up front, right? So know that when it comes to VAT withholding or withholding on VAT, you must be appointed by the Commissioner General. How does he appoint people? The law said it should be in writing, so he writes letters to the persons he has appointed. But in practice, what happens is the Commissioner General publishes in the dailies the list of persons he has appointed to become VAT withholding agents. So what it means is if you see your name in the dailies, it means you've been selected, you've been handpicked. How does he go about selecting these? Nobody knows. The first list he published in April of 2018, effective May 2018, had a number of entities, so they comprised the upstream, a number of oil and gas companies, a number of mining companies, a number of financial services, then the big telcos. So all of these guys were in the first list. They were appointed, they were required to withhold when we were making payments that had VAT charged as part of the payment. Then he published another list in September of 2019, effective October 2019, and this list had additional companies. Back then, these were companies who would have ordinarily called taxpayers who were medium taxpayers. Don't forget that if you've watched our video on tax administration, we've said that the GRA has done away with the categorization of large taxpayers, medium taxpayers, and small taxpayers. We now have area offices and taxpayer service centers in addition to the large taxpayer office. So remember, the key takeaway point from here is that the Commissioner General appoints persons he wants to be VAT withholding agents. How does he do it? He writes letters of appointment to them, congratulating them on their appointment, and then he follows up with a publication in the daily so that taxpayers get to know that this person has been appointed, so I should expect that when I'm doing business with him, he will begin to deduct a portion of my invoice amount as VAT withholding to pay to the Ghana Revenue Authority. Now that we know the mode of appointment, what are the duties of persons who have been appointed as VAT withholding agents? They really have two duties at a very basic level. The first is to withhold from the payments to a registered VAT trader 7% of the taxable output value of standard rated supplies. Let me emphasize here, standard rated supplies. If you have watched our VAT series once again, you know we have a number of supplies. We have standard rated supplies, which are VAT supplies, which at the current rate will be at 12.5%, in addition to the National Health Insurance Levy and the Ghana Education Trust Fund Levy of 2.5% each. And then we have those under the VAT flat rate scheme who will be at the 3%. We have the zero rated scheme at 0%. So this focuses on those under the standard rate. So it means you don't apply withholding VAT on zero rated supplies. You don't apply them on VAT flat rates, the 3% guys. Remember this, it applies to standard rated supplies. I'll show you the exact figure you must apply the rate on in a minute or so. So remember, their first duty is to withhold when they are making payments to a registered VAT trader. What is the rate? 7%. 7% on what? It should be the taxable output value of what? Standard rated supplies. After they withhold, what must they do next? Their next duty is that at the time of making payments for the standard rated supplies, they must issue to the person they withheld on something called a withholding VAT credit certificate. I'll show you how it looks like shortly. Obviously, this is supposed to serve as evidence that indeed, when I was making payment to you, I took a certain portion, and this is evidence. So this withholding VAT credit certificate is as good as money. And as we'll find out shortly, it can be used to reduce a person's tax payable by way of an input tax deduction in their VAT return or their monthly accounting of VAT to the Ghana Revenue Authority. So remember, two main duties. First is to withhold 7% of the taxable output value of standard rated supplies when they are making payments, and the second is issue to that person something called a withholding VAT credit certificate, showing evidence that they have withheld. Once again, because we want to make learning easy, let's try and mirror this to the concept of tax or withholding tax credit certificates under the everyday usual withholding tax system. You know, under that one too, when a withholding agent withholds on you, what do? They are supposed to issue to you a certificate showing that indeed they have withheld tax on you. And this certificate we mentioned can be used by you to reduce your tax payable at the end of the year, or serve as a tax credit when you are doing your year-end income tax computation as a company. So remember that this serves a similar purpose, which is to serve as evidence, number one, that tax has been withheld, and number two, you can use this certificate to reduce the amount of taxes payable. Remember this. Now that we know the duties of a withholding agent, what is the value? What is the base? On what amount do you apply the 7%? So let's run quickly through how VAT is computed in Ghana. If you've watched our videos on VAT, you should be aware of this already. First thing is that you know that, let's assume that you have an invoice value of 100 cedis, right? If your invoice value is 100 cedis, you know that you charge the NHL and the Get Fund levy before everything else. So you charge NHL at 2.5%. Here will give you 2 cedis 50 pesos. Then you charge the Get Fund levy also at 2.5%. That will give you 2 cedis 50 pesos. What the GR recommends we do is to add the levies to the base to get the taxable value for VAT of 105 or 105 Ghana cedis. It is this 105 Ghana cedis that you typically apply your 12.5% VAT on to get the VAT charge. So here you can see we've taken VAT at 12.5% to get the tax, which is VAT on this. The base on which you apply the 7% is the 105. Don't forget that we said a few minutes ago that it's 7% on the taxable output value of standard rated supplies. So it means it's going to be 7% of your 105. That is what you withhold on, and that is what you pay to the GRA as withholding VAT for the period. So remember this, it's on the value inclusive of the levies. There's a lot of questions we get sometimes. Do you apply the 7% on the 100 cedis without the levies? Do you apply it on everything after VAT, which is the 8, everything here? No, that's not what you do. You are required to withhold on the value inclusive of the levies, which is NHL and Get Fund levy, but exclusive of the VAT itself. Remember this, it's very, very important. So what it means is essentially you withhold 7% and pay the difference to the supplier. So you pay the supplier the whole amount or the whole transaction plus the VAT value less 7%. That's essentially what you pay to the person you are dealing with. Now that you know what you withhold on, this is how the certificate looks like. Remember I said you withhold 7% and you issue a certificate to them evidencing that you have withheld if you are a withholding agent. So this is a certificate. GRA recommends that companies print this themselves. Unlike another difference between this and income taxes, under income tax withholding, even though the law says you should, as an agent, issue, the GRA does it themselves. So you have to go for your certificate from a GRA office, but even the law says you, the agent, should do the issuance 30 days afterwards. But that's not the subject for today. Remember that here, when it comes to VAT withholding, in practice, the VAT agents themselves print this. So you can see at the top right corner, there's a place for placing your organization's logo. So you put your company's logo there nicely. And then there's information for the withholdee, which is the person you are dealing with or withholding on. And there's a place also for the withholding agent, which is you, the company. So you enter your name, your TIN, your tax office, the contact numbers, your email, the period, the amount covered, and everything. So this is what you issue as proof of tax withheld. Very, very, very important to know what this looks like. Now that we know who must be appointed or how the appointment even happens, we know on what value it is the tax is applied, and we know what rate of withholding, which is 7%. We know the duties of an agent. What is the scope? Who are those who can probably fall within the appointment scope? It's actually everybody within a certain scope, right? So let me clarify. So the scope of a VAT withholding agent will include VAT registered entities whose supplies are zero rated. So the fact that your supplies are zero rated doesn't mean the Commissioner General cannot come and choose you to be an agent for his withholding purposes. He can choose you even though you, on your part, you are a zero rated supplier. This does not mean, take note, some people interpret this to mean that you are required to withhold on zero rated supplies. No, it means persons whose supplies are zero rated can be appointed as agents. And then we also say here that selected government and other VAT registered entities can also be appointed. So in the initial list that the Commissioner published in 2018, there were a number of government entities. We had a number of the ministries, the departments and agencies on the list, because going in line with this, they were required to also withhold when they were making payments to their suppliers. So take note of this, it's important. Now let's try and tie this nicely with what we learned when we're doing VAT in our series on VAT. Remember we said entities of taxable persons for VAT purposes are entitled to something called a deductible input tax. By way of deductible input tax, for a quick reminder, remember we said we have the input-output mechanism for VAT, where you pick your output VAT, you deduct your deductible input VAT, and the difference, if your output VAT exceeds your deductible input VAT, then you have a difference to pay to the GRA. If your deductible input VAT exceeds your output VAT, then you have a VAT credit, which you can carry forward to subsequent periods. And we learned in our VAT videos that some persons, when they satisfy certain conditions, like those who are required to export a certain threshold, can apply for a VAT refund. But that's not the subject for today. Here we are saying that the Act which introduced the withholding VAT mechanism, which is Act 954 of 2017, introduced a new line, which I've highlighted, into Section 48 of our VAT Act, which deals with deductible input tax. It says that in addition to everything we have here, you may deduct from your output tax for the period a number of things: tax on goods and services, purchase in Ghana, import and all of that, on the condition that number one, it's a taxable supply. We've learned this already. You are in possession of a tax invoice and those related to warehousing and imports. That aside, he said, in respect of supplies made in Ghana, the taxable person is in possession of a withholding VAT credit certificate issued under this act. What this provision is implying is that withholding VAT credit certificates are now deductible input taxes. So on your return, you will realize that if you watch the VAT return, I showed one on the videos for VAT, there is a separate box under the input section for withholding VAT, separate line where you indicate or input the amount of withholding VAT you have for the month or the period. You apply 7%, and then the difference or the value is what you deduct. So remember that the certificate the person gives you when they've withheld on you should be used by you to add up to your input tax for the period, and then you reduce your output tax by this input tax figure and you pay the difference to the Ghana Revenue Authority. So takeaway point from here is that withholding VAT credit certificates are going to be used or utilized by way of a deductible input tax. What is the requirement or what's the duty around submission of the tax return and payment of taxes and all of that? We are saying that a VAT withholding agent is required to, not later than the 15th day of the month immediately following the month to which the returns relate, submit to the Commissioner General returns relating to the VAT withheld under the VAT Act for each period, and then they pay the amount withheld for each period to the Commissioner General. So here we have learned that when you withhold, you are required to, on the 15th day of the next month, pay the amount you've withheld as VAT, the 7% amount, and also file a tax return, which I'll show you how it looks like shortly. So for withholding VAT, you have two duties. First is to withhold and issue a certificate that's on one leg to the person you withheld on. The next is your duty as the withholding agent, which is to ensure that the money you withheld, the tax you withheld, you pay to the GRA 15 days after the month has ended, and you also file a return for that same period. Remember, for ease of remembrance, if you want to just have a memory aid or memory jog, what you need to recall is that all our withholding tax returns are due on the 15th day of the next month. So if you are watching our videos on withholding tax, we said withholding tax returns were due on or before the 15th day of the next month. This withholding VAT being a concept technically under withholding, the law has to or try to streamline them as one set of taxes. So withholding VAT returns are due on the same day as withholding tax returns. So remember, if you're a company that has been appointed by the Commissioner General as a VAT withholding agent, then on the 15th, you now have two obligations. On the 15th, you file your income tax return and make payments for income taxes you withheld on people. And then on the VAT side, you also make payments for withholding VAT or VAT withheld on the 7% amount and file a return. Then on this same 15th, if you remember when we're talking about employment taxes, because the PAYE mechanism or the pay as you earn mechanism is essentially a withholding mechanism because the law deems it a provision for withholding by an employer under section 114 of Act 896. That's not the subject here, but because withholding by an employer is actually withholding tax, that is why on the 15th day you also file your pay as you earn returns for your employees as an employer. So we have tried to put together all the withholding taxes on one day, 15th day. So never forget, and I don't think you forget, that withholding VAT returns are due on the 15th day of the subsequent month. What does the return look like? A withholding VAT return looks like this, really. Those of you who have seen a withholding tax return will know that this is quite similar. They are both Excel based or spreadsheet based, and this is how they look. So take note, as usual, if you've watched our videos on tax administration, we've said that every return, every document, every item you submit to the GRA must have your taxpayer identification number clearly stated on the face of it. So your name as an entity or a taxable person, the period of your as a month you withheld what the transaction relates to, your name, your TIN. Then there are details for the name of the taxpayer, the withholdee, the person you withheld on. That will go into the second column. Then their TIN, their taxpayer identification number. Then the invoice date, the date the underlying invoice was or relates to. Then the invoice number. Don't forget that VAT invoices are required to be numbered sequentially in the invoice booklet if you've watched our VAT videos. Then the payment date, on which day did you make payment for the amount. Then the taxable output value. Remember, this is the value I said will be the invoice value plus National Health Insurance levy 2.5% plus a Ghana Education Trust Fund levy 2.5% without including VAT itself. So you put the taxable output value there. Then in the last column, which is VAT withheld, will be 7% of that value. So you compile everything together, there'll be total at the bottom. Whatever you get is what you're supposed to pay. You probably issue a check or wire transfer or whatever you want to pay with. Now that GRA is going electronic payments, you can use bank transfers and mobile money and different payments methods. Hopefully we'll have cryptocurrency in the future. Then at the bottom you have a declaration. Once again, tax administration, we've learned that you are required to declare at the bottom that to the best of your ability, to the best of your knowledge, every single thing you've disclosed on the face of the return is correct and is accurate. So this is it. Quick recap of withholding VAT. Key takeaway point is number one, the difference between this and income tax withholding is that for income tax withholding, you mustn't be appointed. For VAT withholding, you must be selected. You must have been called. You must have been chosen before you can withhold. The next is that a similarity between income tax withholding and VAT withholding is that under both systems, the returns must be filed on the 15th day of the next month. Actually, for those watching for exam, this is a very possible exam question. Differences between the two, which is income tax withholding and VAT withholding, and then similarities. So listen carefully. Then the next is, apart from the fact that they are both due on the 15th, they also operate with a certificate mechanism where the withholding agent must issue to the person they withheld on a certificate as proof that they have been withheld on. Then finally, another similarity is that under both systems, the certificate can be used as credits to reduce your taxes payable for the period. So this has been a quick summary of VAT withholding, or the concept of withholding VAT in Ghana. If you have any questions, don't forget to leave them in the comments box below. And as always, if you love this, don't forget to smash the like button and to share this video within your entire network. I'll catch you in the next video.